We have one more keynote for today, and I personally coming from, well, we're all actually all of our keynotes today are also educators, but we have one more keynote today with a focus on education as a case study for what other fields might be able to learn about AI. And I'm so happy to be introducing um, Maha Bali and Anna Mills, who are our two speakers who are going to take us home today. And they happen to be educators that I look up to and admire and whose work I have been following actively in this field. They also both are advisors on the AI pedagogy project. But when I think about who are leading thinkers in this area, these two women come to mind. So I also want to give you proper introductions here. Um, I'll start with Maha. Maha is a professor of practice at the Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo. Um, her PhD is in education from the University of Sheffield in the UK. She's co-founder of virtuallyconnected.org and co-facilitator of Equity Unbound. And um, she also has a number of other affiliations, and you can read her full bio on the Summit website. She writes and speaks frequently about social justice, critical pedagogy, and open and online education. Anna Mills. Hi, Maha. Welcome. Anna Mills has taught writing in California community colleges for 20 years and is the author of a widely used open educational resource textbook, How Arguments Work, a guide to writing and analyzing text in college. As a result, and I would have a lot of thoughts about what's happening with writing specifically in this moment in AI. Her work on AI appears in the Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Ed, Computers and Composition, AIpedagogy.org, and TextGen Ed Continuing Experiments. She serves on the Modern Language Association Task Force on Writing in AI, and as faculty for the American Associations of Colleges and Universities, Institute on AI Pedagogy and the Curriculum, and more. So again, I'm just cutting the bio short because it gets a little bit embarrassing when too many of one's accolades get read in front of them. But I am so thrilled to have you both here. Just a few housekeeping notes for people who have just joined. You can turn on closed captioning at the bottom of your own screen. Um, the talks are being recorded and will go up um, in early September on the Summit website if you missed stuff earlier. Please use the Q&A tool throughout to drop any questions you have. And with that, I will turn it over to Maha and Anna. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. Anna and I have been working together a lot especially since the whole ChatGPT thing. So I'm going to share a slide that has our blue sky. I don't know who here is on blue sky, but just in case you want to stay in touch later. annamillsoer.bsky.social or mahabali@bsky.social. And we're going to be talking about what can we do about and with AI from education as a case study. And the first thing we want to do before we even say anything is to hear from you about how you've been feeling, especially your first reaction to AI. I'm going to show this QR code in a different setting as I turn on Mentimeter. And please answer there. So you can either get the QR code from the screen, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code. All right, I can share now. Starting to get results. And the font is really tiny, but a lot of skeptical pragmatists. Oh, playful chaotics. We have also a lot of people seeking efficiency. We have a lot of playful chaotic still, and some people who are more human-centric purists. And we have a few anti-capitalists, a few footprint alarmists, a few data guardians. So there's a lot of people who actually know some of the big issues. So that's good to hear. Not many of the shutdown brigade. And I think the number of people who say this now must be different than what we had before. And there's an instrumentalization wizard, much less than I was expecting. And we have 10 capitalists who see AI as a way to make profit, I guess, in a good way for them. All right. So the majority are skeptical pragmatists. Skepticism is good. Pragmatism is useful. Right. And you can comment on our slides anytime beyond this session. So when Anna and I first got together, we were experimenting. I think we were in the sort of curious exploration phase. But different people were in different places, and I think it's people, there were some people who are polarized, and it's so important to work against AI shaming and to go towards professional agency in relation to AI. So some people are curiously exploring, some are excited, some are ambivalent, but there was a lot of overwhelm and frustration in the beginning. There were and still are people who resist and reject AI, and they have reasons, and I see that some in our audience may share those reasons, and these attitudes are evolving. So take it away, Anna.
And I think we're seeing, this incredible, at best, a large discussion that includes all of these things. And and in some ways that looks like chaos, and in other ways I think it's exactly what we need. And I'm sort of inspired by Frank Pasquale's 2020 book, The New Laws of Robotics, which is a really powerful call to professionals to take leadership and define the terms and the limits of the integration of AI in our fields, protecting important values. And that's really a core idea that both Arvind and Kathy also highlighted. And I think, in these discussions where all this contradiction comes up, that's what we're doing, is seeking that professional agency that is values based. So from those discussions, we really have seen this explosion of the creation of AI policy guides, pedagogy guides, resource lists, instructional materials, um, all these shared resources as we're asking ourselves and each other these core questions. So what guidance and guardrails do students need? In what ways can and should generative AI support learning? In what forms does it get in the way of learning? How can and should we hold students accountable if we're putting limits? And what do students need to learn about AI to prepare them for interacting with it in their futures? And should our learning goals change? And if so, how? Um, so again, in some ways, it looks like a big chaotic discussion and conflict, because we don't agree often and we don't always agree with ourselves. But I think we're really drawing on some deep strengths, on a tradition of both independence and collaboration in education, of searching for professional agency in community. So teachers are in some ways notoriously independent. We often run our own classrooms and we want to stand behind our own particular pedagogical choices. But we are also very collaborative. We support each other. We share. There's this sense that we're in this together. We're facing similar challenges, and and we're trying things. We're reflecting in community. We're changing our practices in conversation with each other. So I think that's a strength that's really manifested in these AI discussions. And that has, in the past looked like office and break room and committee collaboration at our institutions and at conferences, but it's really expanded and changed to include digital networks. And so we've seen a lot of this discussion and material sharing happening on social media. Um, that has expanded. It started, there was a lot on X, things have changed. There's a lot on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn, to some extent, Mastodon, Threads, but also in groups and listservs, both private and public, um, blog posts and newsletters, online workshops and webinars, as well as more structured programs for professional development and communities of practice. So this is both local and national and international and disciplinary and cross-disciplinary, that we're seeing this explosion of discussion. And I want to highlight that contrary to the reputation of sort of social media and digital networks, much of this discussion has been really supportive open and has included things like vulnerability, mutual support, problem solving, mixed feelings, uncertainty, curiosity, questioning, and that these, social media and listservs have allowed for really a lot of immediate response to AI changes, and more informal and kind of rough responses.
And this, one of the things that characterized a lot of what Anna and I were seeing around us and that we were doing was there was a lot of public sharing and the use of open licenses. So there were Creative Commons license slide decks where people were brainstorming different creative ways of learning about AI, prompts, what they were doing in their classes, pedagogical practices, instructional materials. And these open licenses, in case not everyone knows what Creative Commons license is, it's it's different than copyright. You are allowing people to reuse your stuff and telling them you can even edit my stuff and you can add to my stuff as long as you attribute me for the most part. And there are even licenses that don't even ask for attribution. So people were open to their work being changed and improved and translated and modified by others. And a lot of it was people actually out there asking questions and not just offering answers. And as academics, I think there's a reputation of trying to be a know-it-all and like you know what you're doing and you're an expert. Nobody was an expert, so it was okay to be asking questions and to being adaptable and not to be fixed. Oops, not to be fixed in whatever you were sharing. Like one day I would say, this is how we should attribute AI. And the next day I'd have a conversation with Anna and a few others on X and we're like, oh no, maybe we should do it differently, right?
Mhm.
And the two of us co-authored with Lance Eaton, who's giving a workshop tomorrow about how open educational practices have given us a framework for this ongoing process. Now, I don't know of responding to something new and shocking and unexpected and uncertain like generative AI. And I don't know how other fields, like what kind of communities of practice you have and how open these are versus being competitive and closed. But I hope that you have a space outside of your own institution without hierarchies to explore these things.
Mhm. And, I think we just have to name that in this search for sort of collaborative agency, we are confronting other forces. So, corporate AI, commercial ed tech, sometimes administrators who are swayed by hype or anxiety and corporate pressures, to sort of legislate AI's role in education. Everybody has an opinion, and educators' expertise is not always recognized or sought out. And so within this context in education, and also looking at this question of, how do we have power beyond the sphere of education? There's these larger questions. How can we and our students participate in shaping AI futures? And in education, we get to talk about that with students. And in other professions, there's also a sense of we're in the same boat with the people we serve to some extent, in that we are not the engineers building this or the VCs funding it, but we're still seeking agency. So go ahead, Maha.
And so Anna is, I think, teaches. I teach, but I'm mainly an educational developer. My role is to support other people with their teaching. So I can't just be concerned about my own classroom. And the thing is, what I keep telling all the educators around us is you need to be educated about AI because students have access to it. Not because AI is going to inevitably transform education, but just because students have access to it anyway, regardless of what you believe. So you need to learn about it ourselves in order to teach about it, even if we're not going to teach with it, even if we're not going to embrace it. You still need to know what it is students have access to, decide what you want to do about it, and be able to have those conversations with students. And so what we try to encourage, and it's sometimes difficult because there's so much uncertainty, is go back to your base values. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What are you communicating with your students? What are you negotiating? Why are you negotiating this way? So trying to encourage people to try to look for meaningful learning and assessments with or without AI, and focus on enduring learning goals and skills like critical judgment and reflection. So each person in their profession, in their discipline, is to keep focusing on what's important and knowing why. Not get distracted by AI, but AI is part of the landscape right now, and you need to figure out where it goes. And there are people doing the work to shape how it's used rather than it coming from above. There are institutions that might be deciding for people what to do, but most of the institutions I've seen have given a lot of their faculty freedom, especially higher education, I think. given their faculty freedom to decide for themselves. There may be departments that are more restrictive, but for the most part, I tend to see the spectrum of people who don't want to use it at all, people who want to integrate it fully, and people who use it in small pieces in different ways. And I think the important thing, and we call this critical AI literacies, remaining aware of a lot of the harms as well as how to harness it if you want to. And the work of people like Chris Gilliard and Audrey Waters and other Global South, so Audrey and Chris are American, but other scholars who come from the Global South help us understand why the issue of bias is so important and the power issues are so problematic and the hidden agendas of the corporations need to be taken into account as we're not just going to be able to look at AI as a separate tool outside of that context. And what we've seen in some institutions, and possibly Lance is going to talk about this in his workshop tomorrow because he's a leader in this, how do we use participatory approaches so that the guidelines that get developed in an institution are co-developed with students, with professors, and not coming from top down. And then the important thing is for students to develop the critical judgment of when and where to use it appropriately or not use it, and not just the educators. And I was recently at a conference where someone was talking about how lawyers were told from above to use AI, but then the stuff that they created contained hallucinated or fake cases that never existed, or real cases, but their descriptions were incorrect. And then they got into trouble and they could have gotten jailed for using that. And then also about there's so much deep fake evidence that people now have to deal with and have to figure out if this evidence actually happened or if it's AI generated. And again, going back to our underlying values and engagement with complexity, not knee-jerk reactions. There were a lot of educators, I think, in the beginning who were thinking, oh, this is cheating. We need to catch the students. How do we police them? How do we detect that someone has used AI when I haven't authorized them to do it? But we believe it's not only in education, but hopefully in other fields that can do the same, which is to develop shared understanding, the expectations and accountability, and to do this iteratively, because the AI is changing, what we understand about it is changing. This whole landscape is entangled. So the work of Tim Fons, basically what he's saying is, some people think the technology is going to drive how we teach our pedagogy. That's actually not true. Some people believe teachers are controlling what's happening, but that's also not exactly true. It's more complex than that. It's entangled. There are a lot of complex factors outside of the teacher and the technology, and even the students, and even outside the classroom, that are, some are outside our control and some are within our control. And the hope is that we intentionally adapt with our values and our goals in mind. And we hope that in education, we don't lose sight of what's important in the process of responding to this complex landscape that's changing on us all the time. And I just want to say thank you to Anna, because she's one of the people who led a lot of helping other people figure out what to do. And especially writing teachers, I think, were the ones who were most most worried, I think, but also they're some of the most innovative teachers out there. So, all right. So I'm going to put a link to our slides again. You can see on the slides, we made the time. We're so good on time. I'm so proud of us.
And I put something in the
You can keep
chat.
commenting. Yeah, good.
For US-based audiences, there's an opportunity to comment on our administration's recent letter on AI in education, and you can actually see other people's comments. And there's a blog post giving context about it. So in that spirit of looking for ways we can have power in the larger process of shaping AI in our field.
Amazing. Thank you so much
Thanks for
to
sharing.
Maha and Anna. We are going to shift over to Q&A. So Kasha and I, as before, will moderate the Q&A. And we're just coming back here. For those of you who haven't yet, please go ahead and drop questions into the Q&A tool, and we'll see how many we can get to. Maha and Anna, thanks also for sharing your slides right off the bat and inviting comments and questions. And we will also be sharing recordings of this, as well as the other keynotes from today, with slides on the Summit website at the beginning of September. So I will go ahead and kick us off. How do each of you use AI specifically, like in your specific classrooms? How do each of you use AI? This is a question from Rowan.
So I've really focused on giving AI the role of complementary writing feedback that does not tell students how to write or what to write. Doesn't tell them ideas or words to use, but that stimulates their thinking about the writing process. And that complements peer feedback, instructor feedback, tutor feedback as well. And so, it's a limited role within a human-centered writing process, but students do find it really stimulating and supportive. And it gives them some chance to practice prompting as well as they chat with that feedback system. Um, So yeah, and I experiment with other chatbots, but really, even though I'm teaching about AI, they're reading about AI, they're discussing it in my writing class. Um, they're looking for some clear messages about some guardrails. What do I do? What do I not do? And for first year composition in college, I think it makes a lot of sense to introduce one clear role and to give them the chance to develop their writing, which helps them develop their thinking, their confidence, their sense of agency, even though it's really hard. I don't do that in a hybrid way. I would need to protect that space for them to write their own essay and have it really be fully theirs, even if later they will work in hybrid ways. Um, yeah. Maha?
Yeah. So I teach a liberal arts course called Digital Literacies and Intercultural Learning. And my overall stance, I've been teaching about AI even before ChatGPT because it's part of digital literacies, right? I mean, and Kathy was talking about this as well. My point in my class is that I want my students to develop critical AI literacies, which involves critical judgment and use and develop their critical judgment rather than have me tell them what they can do and what they can't do. But before they do that, they need to have an understanding of what bias is and what unconscious bias is when you have a bias, but you don't know that you have it. And to understand social justice issues and different types of oppression and things like this, because if they don't have that foundation, then I can't talk about these things and why they're harmful and how AI perpetuates them. And then I model a lot of different ways of using AI. I encourage them to talk to me about their attitudes towards AI, what they find it useful for, what they don't find it useful for. And I model prompting and different ways of prompting and how you iterate and improve the prompts. But we also talk about the harm to the environment and the exploitation of labor and all of that happens. And because they're from Egypt, they come across the biases so much more than if they were white Americans, honestly. Because the bias is against their people and their culture and their language and their religion most of the time. And so it's easier for them to see, oh my God, this thing is biased, you know? And the thing that I do actually towards the end is they have a big project, and I'm like, you're free to use AI however you like. From the beginning, they can use AI, and they just need to cite it. They just need to let me know they've used it. For this big project, it has 5 phases, and I say you can use AI at any point or choose not to, but you have to reflect on why you did or why you didn't and what came out of it. And what I discovered is every student uses it in a different way. Some students, they like their own writing. They feel like, oh, it takes my writing voice. I don't like it. I'll write on my own. Others say, I need help with grammar. It really helped me with that. Others say, I needed it to help me with outlining and brainstorming. Others say, it stereotypes my experience. I'm not going to use it. And that is exactly how I think it should be in the world, is that different people should have agency to discover how AI is going to be useful to me personally in my field, in my area of interest, given my strengths, given my areas of improvement. And whether I want to improve this or I want to let AI do it for me so I can spend more time on something that I think is more important. And we talk about that, like what's the thing that you're going to be an expert in that you need to do yourself? And what are things that you can relegate to AI so you can focus on what you need to focus on? But do you know enough about what you're doing with AI to know whether what it gave you is good quality or crap? So that's something they discover, that when they don't do that, they get a bad grade. And then I don't give them an F or have a bad conversation with them. They just got a bad grade. So they realized the AI wasn't doing a good job for that. And because my students are from different majors, they need to figure out in their discipline. They go to talk to their professors, to people, professionals in their discipline, and decide.
Amazing. And I think this is the exact kind of very tactical advice that folks are looking for in the questions that I'm seeing so far. And also, I didn't get to say hi earlier. Hi, folks. I'm Kasha. Another great question here. You talked, Maha, a little bit about how we want to make sure that young people and people of all ages are using AI on a foundation. There's a question here about the risks of behavioral addiction, especially when we think about AI with children and young adults. And so if you have any thoughts about that as part of the foundation of how to use, when to stop using these kinds of tools, especially for young people.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on young people, so but I know that the advice about screen time was made up. It wasn't based on data. I think we need to base things on data. But okay, my approach to this is, well, they need to know what's real before they can start using AI. They need to be able to read and write before they can use AI to do that for them. In the same way, we don't give children calculators until they can do addition and subtraction. And the calculator is always going to give them the right answer. AI is not going to do that. So, and I know I didn't want to give my child a phone until a certain age, but then the pandemic happened and she got more digitized much earlier on social media, much earlier than I wanted. I don't have the answer to this, but it is, I think we should be worried about this because people who are in college right now, they grew up without AI for quite some time. So they did have time to develop a little bit of a sense of this. And in college, it's still early, so we can still manage to develop their critical judgment. I think for very young people who are born now and this is right in front of them, younger than 12, I'm very concerned. And I know they already have access to it and some of them are using it and schools block it, but they can access it other ways, right? Anna, you also have children, so I wonder what you're thinking.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one thing I do is sort of to share empathetically that I'm also affected by these addictive tendencies and I struggle with them. And so that doesn't need to be shame about that. I think my students are already very concerned about that for their own lives, for their peers, for kids they know. And I see sort of guardrails and accountability as supports here and not as punitive, but as sometimes we need to be told there's a boundary. This is not the time to use it. This is the time to make space for something else. And as humans, as in other fields, we need some form of accountability to hold ourselves to those things sometimes to help with trust. And so I've really tried to talk with students openly about ways that I set up accountability to discourage use when it doesn't fit the learning goal. And so that they have some sense of fairness that their classmates are not just getting to use it however they want and getting the grade that they want. And so I have explored things like process tracking and even AI detection, despite all its problems, I've introduced in a very minor way as I teach online asynchronous writing classes, because I think that, we don't have, it doesn't have to be about punishment and policing. It can be about structures for creating space, creating some form of accountability, and so that we can limit when and how we're using these systems so we can make space for other things. And I know that that's something we want to, many people explore in our own lives, right? Creating structures so that we're not constantly online or we have a break from social media or whatever it is. So, discussions without shame about the addictiveness and the need for, support in meeting our resolutions. Um, yeah.
What you're saying, Anna, also made me think about not just trust, but also compassion. Like, are we giving young people other forms of support that are not AI so that they can reach out to humans and get support from humans and build relationships in the process? Do we have enough teaching assistants? Do we have enough, a supportive class environment that's not competitive so they can help each other? Because if they don't have that, then AI is quicker and it's right there.
Great. I'm going to ask two questions somewhat combined, and I'm going to extrapolate a little bit on them. So from Nazreen and then on an anonymous question, plagiarism is a real concern in academia, especially if one is not allowed to use these tools and is using them. But worse is being wrongfully accused. Can you say something? Can you speak to can you speak to the reliability or unreliability of AI detectors? Can you also talk about the work that's required for faculty who expect that there is AI tool use, like how to escalate that or check for it in other ways if you're not using an AI detector? And then relatedly, what about teachers using AI to provide feedback on student work? And where do you both stand on that?
Well, I think the big question, not just for our field, but for society, is to what extent are we going to support some kind of transparency around what is human and what is not? And this is in workplaces, in interviews, or people using AI to do the interview. The AI companies don't want that. No, companies need to know what is their employees' work and what is AI and how did they interact. And we as teachers need to know that to assess learning, whether or not we're inviting students to use AI. We need to know what did the student do. And I think that we don't have to approach it punitively to create those guardrails. Um, and we need to acknowledge the labor involved, and we need to fund the technology that would minimize that labor and make it easier for teachers to say, no, how much time was spent on a document. None of these methods are going to be foolproof, like cybersecurity. There are going to be ways around it and people who game the system, but you try to minimize the damage and reduce the harm to learning and the cases where people are missing out on learning. And so you have to combine a lot of different strategies to do that. And some of those, many of those are about motivation and pedagogy and relationship. And those may be the most effective, but I think they're not enough in what I've seen and heard from teachers. And so you also need guardrails that are about maybe some form of technical support for transparency about what did the student do and what was the machine. And that could be process tracking. I do think detection has been important to reintroduce for me as a deterrent for my students. But I tell them, if something is flagged, I'm going to have a conversation. I know that the detectors sometimes make mistakes. I'm not interested in punishing them. I'm interested in getting them to do the work if they haven't yet. And so I think from that perspective, it's a different thing. But we need a lot more transparency about the detection systems, their bias, how they've been tested, before I would be happy with any of those systems. And I know, Maha is going to speak back to that.
I feel more strongly against the detectors because I'm like, what's the point of, if you think of a detector, it's like a calculator that's wrong half the time. What's the point? And I know someone was telling me calculators aren't always 100% correct, but compared to ChatGPT, they're mostly correct most of the time if you give it the right input. But with detectors, they're AI themselves. And I don't want to encourage policing, but I understand people are frustrated and tired. And if you have like 100 students, it's so much harder to have a conversation with every single one of them. So one of the things, first of all, the conversation thing is the main thing, really. That's the only way you're going to really know, by talking to a student, whether they've written that paper or not, and having their handwritten work and knowing their writing voice and all that, which writing teachers and people who assign a lot of writing do know. But Philip Dawson from Australia has a very important concept, and he says, you know what? Not all of our assessments have to be like foolproof, but we need to have some key assessments that are really important that we need to make sure the students have done themselves, and we need to decide which ones really need to be done without AI, because you can't get into that profession if you don't know how to do this thing without AI. And you need to decide what those things are. And then for those things, maybe needs to be like an offline analog exam with pen and paper sometimes, or an oral exam one-on-one with the teacher or something, or a project that students are working on in front of you, or that kind of thing. But not everything needs to go through that. And having a lot of low stakes things, the low stakeness in itself might discourage students from using AI inappropriately. And then there might be spaces where AI is actually appropriate, but I would never push anyone to go towards, like in some fields, people really don't want to use AI in that level for that course, for that discipline. But they just need to understand that detectors are not 100%. If they use it the way Anna does, that's great. But a lot of people want to use it and not do any of the other work, which is redesigning their assessment, which I understand they may not have time. I mean, we're all burnt out. Our institutions didn't give us more time to redesign our courses when AI came about. A question about feedback. Anna talks better about this than I do, and she has a lot more experience. I teach a small class. I don't think it's right when I have only 20 students to use AI to give feedback to my students, because I want to read their work and respond to their work and engage with their work. And I feel like it's demotivating for them that, they're going to write it with AI. The AI is going to give them feedback. There's no reason for any humans to be involved. And what's the point, But my university has a large language course for like a MOOC, like hundreds of thousands of people, and they can't give human feedback. And in that sense, AI could be useful. If you're going to create something where people don't have access to teachers who are experts in the thing, then can we train an AI to grade and give feedback based on a rubric that we understand? that could be useful, but I don't have use for it in my particular context. I have students who themselves feed ChatGPT the rubric, or Perplexity or Claude or whatever, the rubric, and then tell it, use this rubric to assess my writing and give me feedback. I have seen research that says, and Mark Marino, who's here, has done some research. Sometimes the thing that we keep hearing is it gives similar feedback, even if you're a really good writer, to the people who are average. Like it doesn't, but that I didn't do that research myself. I've seen that it gives a similar tone if you're doing really badly and if you're doing really well. The feedback is different, but the tone is the same. So it confuses the student to know, oh, am I doing well or not, you know? But Anna has a lot more experience, so I'll let her respond to this one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of variety in what you can do with AI feedback. And I'm just putting a link to my piece that's student directed about it in the chat. And also the peer and AI review plus reflection project that I work with from University of California, Davis, really emphasizes that the AI feedback should not replace the human feedback, that, as Maha said, that could be really demotivating and dehumanizing. And we even want the AI feedback to remind the students of the intrinsic purpose and meaning of the writing as human communication. So it's saying things like, readers might wonder this, or readers might respond to this, readers might be confused by this. So ways in which kind of paradoxically we can emphasize the values and the human interactions that we want to maintain, even through the AI systems. Sometimes we can design them to complement that and to limit what they do if we want to. Yeah.
Amazing. Maybe switching tack a little bit here. There's a question here about epistemic injustice issues and the overlap between epistemic injustice issues or systemic injustice issues and AI. And so wondering about issues that may arise between these two. Maybe AI is fueling something, something's fueling AI, and what you can do about that.
Thank you. It's very funny that you asked this because someone recently asked me what it means. So epistemic injustice, I think in the AI sense, happens in two ways, right? In one sense, AI tools are trained on mainly Western data, mostly English. And so there are certain cultures and languages that are not represented even in its training. So when you ask a question about those cultures, it has very little to say. And there's been research that shows that the more distant your culture is from the US, the less likely ChatGPT is going to say the same kind of thing you would say. So there's that aspect. And then there's another aspect of, well, a lot of what it knows about certain cultures comes from this Western gaze and Western perspective. So it's more likely to be biased against those cultures. So not only does it not represent those cultures in the data and then what it brings out, but then also, so that, hi Lydia, it's called Which Humans? I can try to find the link for you. And sorry, I was responding. She was just asking about the paper for people watching the recording. So as an example, some of the unconscious biases AI does is if you ask it about terrorism and you say, is a person from this country or this other country more likely to be a terrorist? It will tell you, no, we don't stereotype because it's been hard-coded not to be offensive. But if you ask indirectly, the unconscious bias comes out. You say, define terrorism and give me 5 examples. And wouldn't you know, 5 different AI tools will use 3 or 4 Islamic terrorism examples because it has an unconscious bias against terrorism as connected to a particular religion. But you need to be really aware of unconscious bias to notice these things. And I think AI does reproduce this. If we're not aware of this and we're using AI to help us produce things, even I think people who are in open education well-intentioned, trying to ask AI to create personas that are diverse, if you aren't yourself one of those people, or if you aren't very closely connected to people who are racially diverse or whatever, then what AI gives you might seem like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But the person from that culture will feel no. So my students who are visually impaired will say when we ask AI to talk about the experience of a blind person, it stereotypes our experiences. So that's mostly what I mean when I talk about that. Anna, did you want to add anything? And I'll get the link to the article.
Yeah, I would just add that I want to emphasize in any time when I invite students to engage with AI that they're seeing ways in which it fails or is wrong or does not match their intention or their perspective. So cultivating that skepticism of it is also very practical because that's how you improve on what the system does as you see where it's flawed and where it's inadequate. And so ultimately engaging with it can sort of counter that epistemic injustice, sort of trying to put it in its place in our minds and to always cultivate that habit of pushing back and looking beyond it.
Awesome. So we are getting pretty close to the end of our time. I'm going to ask one more question. There's so many good ones here, and then the bonus question, and then we'll just thank you both again. So the last question I wanted to ask came in from Catherine. This is for both of you. What argument do you make to students for why they need to learn to write if a machine can do it for them so easily? And what have you seen work?
Well, my textbook about writing really starts out talking about fast and slow thinking, Daniel Kahneman's framework for recognizing that thinking well is really challenging. And I make the case that the writing process is one method of thinking better that we have developed intensively, that we know this has a lot of power. And that's why we need to keep doing it, um, despite the ways it's difficult and frustrating, and because there's so much power in that process to help us become better thinkers, to make better decisions in our lives, to slow down, to reflect, to get to the next level in terms of clarity. And that's why we're doing everything we're doing. And we can even say, look, you can't be good at editing or prompting AI unless you have quite a bit of experience of wrestling with coming up with your own words, revising, writing. And so if you want to think about it as preparing to be better at working with AI, you can. Um, but it's a core, it's not the only way to develop your thinking, but it is a core offering of academia, is helping our thinking through reading and writing. And that doesn't change. It's more important than ever, actually, in a world in which we're interacting with AI through reading and writing. Um, so yeah. Uh-huh.
Everything Anna said, and the thing that I always emphasize for my students is writing isn't just about a set of words that you put together to express something out of thin air. ChatGPT is not you, or Gemini is not you. It doesn't know you. It only knows what you tell it about you, but it's not you. So how can it think for you, and how can it represent your perspective and your voice and what you want it to say? I think what happened with a lot of students is in high school, they never got to write about what they cared about. So they just had to get the writing done, and it was about a product that was completely disconnected from them. But if you ask them to write about something they want to talk about, they want to convince someone of something, or they want to share something they're passionate about, they'll do that work. It's like this, they'll spend more time on Minecraft trying to figure out how to code something than they will on an assignment in school that's frustrating them because they don't care. And so I try as much as possible to create opportunities like that and tell them that in their lives beyond school, they need to figure out how to express themselves, to pass on messages that they care about based on work that they have done that the technology wasn't there for. And I try to create as many authentic experiences as possible that the AI wouldn't know about, so that they realize that AI can't write about this. And some of my students end up saying, oh, this is an unchat GPTable assignment, So
Thank you. And I'm going to, those were great answers. And I'm going to ask each of you for the sort of mass transmission magic wand question that I asked of Kathy and Arvind. If you could transmit one piece of information about AI to as many people as possible right now, what would it, what would you, what would you communicate?
We got more warning than the others of this question. So I was thinking I would just say that we, the non-techies, can still shape what this looks like. We can make it better or worse. We can reduce harms and increase benefits and increase the degree to which it supports our values. It's not done. It's not one thing that's coming to get us. It's evolving and we're all influencing it. And there are many ways to do that still. So we do have power. We can have power in shaping it.
nice one. I would say question the claims and the hype that people tell you about anything. This seems obvious, but people don't do that with AI for some reason. They want to be impressed. And as one engineer once said, people like magical thinking. And even I'm a computer scientist originally, and oh wow, it does this thing, but question it. Is it really? Is it really doing that? Like, test it until you break it before you believe it.
Love it. Well, again, I want to thank Maha and Anna so much for this. We want to thank them so much for this. You can do your round of applause that they won't hear, but we know you're out there, or you can give lots of kudos and props in the chat. I'm going to turn it to Kasha for them to share a few remarks, and then Kasha will turn it back to me for just a couple other sort of closeout things before we wrap up at in 5 minutes. Thanks again, Maha and Anna. This was
Yeah,
great.
thank you so much, Maha
Thank
and
you so
Anna.
much.
Thanks for having us.
Amazing audience.
Yeah, this has been very fun. We kind of
Yeah,
kept the chat closed for a bit, and then you really encouraged us to open it up. And so when you have a bunch of educators in one place and you enable the chat, glorious things happen. I just want to say that it's been quite an amazing series of talks today. We're so pleased at how many of you showed up and had thoughts and questions. So just a big round of applause for you all as an audience. For those of us who are joining us tomorrow, Newman's going to say a little bit more, I'm sure, but we look forward to seeing you again and kind of diving into more of these topics. But please do feel free to reach out to us, datanutrition.org and the AI Pedagogy Project, and let us know what you thought, or get back in touch with us if you are looking for additional information. I know the slides will be sent out as well. So just a huge thank you from me to all of you for your amazing participation, and back to Newman to wrap us up.
Thanks, Kasha. And just for those of you who maybe joined for this talk but didn't join at the beginning before Arvind's talk, when we started off the day, we talked about the Data Nutrition Project, which Kasha and I are co-founders of, and the AI Pedagogy Project out of Harvard, which I lead, are the two hosting organizations for this summit. We from really different lenses, we focus on AI transparency and empowering people to use technology responsibly. Um, I know people have been asking, tomorrow is at capacity. Tomorrow is going to be 11 parallel workshops running twice for day 2 of the summit, which is interactive day. You can read more about the workshops on the summit website, which is publicaisummit.com or .org, and both of them. And you can read more about those. Unfortunately, we do have a wait list, which is quite full now too, but we will be posting in early September on the summit website the recordings of these talks from today, the slides from the talks from today, and documentation from all 11 of the workshops, which is going to be multimedia in format. So nobody can go to all 11 workshops. Some people can go to 0 of the workshops. Many people are going to be able to go to 2 of the workshops tomorrow, including many of you. So there's going to be documentation up so you can learn more, and we plan to do more programming like this in the future. So again, thank you so much for joining us. A special thanks to the organizing team, Kasha, Sebastian, and Maria. Special thanks to Maya for today for helping out in the chat. And thanks to our speakers, of course, and thanks to all of you for being here. Please keep in touch, and we look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks
We
for
hope to
joining us.
Toodaloo.